Hello again, ladies. I hope you've had a good week. I hope you've enjoyed the Matthew study and come to some new insights about Jesus and his mission and his ministry. And I know I asked you to read Matthew 28, the resurrection story, in preparation for this video. And we'll get to Matthew 28. But I really got gripped as I was looking at the context for our passage by the end of Matthew 27. Matthew 27 is the crucifixion story, which is shared by all the gospel writers. But there's this little segment at the end of Matthew 27 that's only in Matthew, and it really grabbed my attention as I was reading yesterday. It's starting at verse 62 of Matthew 27, and it's the Pharisees' direct request to Pilate to set a guard on the tomb. And it goes like this. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember what the impostor said while he was still alive. After 3 days, I will rise again. Therefore, command the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he has been raised from the dead. And the last deception would be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone. And I was really floored by Pilate's words to these worried religious leaders. There were just a couple things as I looked at that phrase closely. You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can. First of all, Pilate says to them, you have a guard of soldiers. What he says to them literally is you have a custodias. It's not a Greek word, it's a Latin word. And it's the word that we get our words custodian and custody from. He's saying to them, so you have custody of Jesus' tomb. You can guard it. You can keep it secure. You can be in charge of it. Pilate is done with this, and he is passing the ball back to the Jewish religious leaders. And he said, it's in your custody now. I did what you wanted me to do. Now it's between you and your God. And so he gives custody of the tomb to these Jewish leaders. But then the last bit, he says, so go. Make it as secure as you can, or as some of the versions say, make it as secure as you know how to. And that phrase, make it secure, it's a single word in Greek, the verb asphalizo. And we get our word asphalt. Both the verb to asphalt something and the actual noun itself, asphalt. And it's used in Acts chapter 16 of a jailer putting Paul and Silas in the stocks. Asphalt is something solid and concrete and hard to move. And so Pilate is telling them, go make it that way. Seal it. Asphalt it. Make it secure and solid and impregnable against these rumors and these possible threats. But then he tags on that little phrase, as much as you can. And right there is the thick irony of this passage that leads us straight into the resurrection. All the custodial force and all the strength of their security, all the asphalting, if you will, of the tomb is nothing in comparison to the power of resurrection that is about to burst forth from within that tomb. And that irony that Matthew paints there makes the picture of resurrection in Matthew 28 even more powerful. Death is conquered in Matthew 28. That means we no longer have to fear the power of physical death. It's not the end. The opposition to Jesus' ministry and mission is reduced to nothing. Look at what Jesus says to the disciples after his resurrection. Matthew 28, verse 18, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. There is nothing that can stand against resurrection power. Death is conquered. The opposition is conquered. And although Matthew doesn't highlight it as strongly here as Paul will in his writings, sin is conquered. I think it would be a good place for us to finish by going to Colossians, one of Paul's later letters. Colossians chapter 1, verses 21 and 22. Paul is talking to those who were once without Christ. And he says, you who were once estranged and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now reconciled in his fleshly body through death, so as to present you holy and blameless and irreproachable before him. The power of the resurrection doesn't just save us, doesn't just give us new life. It gives us the capacity to live life free from the power of sin and darkness. And that is what Matthew paints so beautifully and highlights by this ironic little episode right before the resurrection, that they had no custody over Jesus' body, and they had no power to seal that tomb against the power of resurrection. When God works, hope is born and fear is conquered. And I pray that you will take that message of the gospel with you through these next weeks. In our next study, we're going to look at how Jesus accomplishes our salvation and our sanctification through his life, death, resurrection, and ascension. But for these next couple weeks, just soak in the fact that death has lost, that the opposition power is on borrowed time, and that the power of sin is broken. I love that line from one of the old hymns. He breaks the power of canceled sin. Sin has been canceled, and it has no power over us anymore. May the Spirit show us in these coming weeks what it means to live free from the power of canceled sin and walking in the truth of Jesus' resurrection. God bless you.